My name is Steve Polatsek. I'm 84 years old, and today date is the 9th of June, 2022. I'm talking to Fred Singer, and we're gonna talk about my experiences during the Holocaust.
And your life.
And my life.
Okay, so where were you born?
I was born in 1938 in Kunhegyes, which is in the middle of Hungary, in a small village.
What year was that?
Was 1938.
Okay. What was the date of your birthday? What's your...
10/7/1938, October 7th, 1938.
And what were your parents' names?
My father is Paul Polatsek. My mother is Rose Friedman. His father was More Polatsek, and his wife was Weiss Ethel. My mother's parents were Lajos Friedman and Gross Berta was my grandparents on my mother's side.
Now, as far as your father, do you remember how old was you know when your father was born? What year?
I don't remember that.
How old was he when you were born? Do you remember?
No. But my father...
Where was he born? What?
He was born in Kunhegyes.
Okay.
And he was a house painter. And my mother and father born in Kunhegyes. And my father was also a painter, house painter.
So who was the first person that you said was a house painter?
My grandfather.
Oh, your grandfather.
Grandfather.
Okay.
And all his sons became painters. My other grandfather from my mother's side was a tinsmith. He made, to get drinking water, he made these vessels for carrying the fresh water home.
From the what, wells?
From the well. We only had 4 wells, artesian wells in a village, because everybody had a well, but you couldn't drink that water. It was not deep enough for drinking. So we used to go to the well and bring home the water for drinking. He lived in a house, had no plumbing, only had a stove for cooking and heating. And I remember my grandfather's house, that's where we were. And
Do you know how do you spell the name of the village?
Kunhegyes, Kunhegyes, Kunhegyes.
Okay.
And
In relationship to big cities in Hungary, where was that?
never went to the big city.
I mean, how close was it to?
Oh, far away, very far. Budapest is a city
In relation, is that the closest big city to?
well, they
your
were a
village?
little bit bigger. See, this was a village. We had bigger cities there, like Szolnok was a bigger city. And then Budapest is a capital of Hungary. But that was far away. We were in the middle of this state, middle of the country.
So your grandfather was a house painter,
House painter,
and your father was a house painter.
yes.
Okay. Did he have any brothers or sisters?
Yes, they were 11 children. My father's
Your father
side,
was one of 11 children.
one of the 11 children. And all the boys had to became painters. And on my other grandfather, Friedman, all the boys became tinsmith. They were working with a sheet of tin, and they bend it, they soldered it, they do whatever had to be done.
So, how many males were there of the 11?
11. I should have prepared it, but I don't
mean, how many
remember.
boys and how many girls of the 11?
No
You don't
idea.
know? Okay.
No. I should have counted out.
So that's your. How about your mother's? Did she have any siblings?
My mother, yes, my mother had a sister, had a brother, and actually had 2 sisters and a younger brother.
And they're from the same town.
Same town.
So how many Jewish people and how many non-Jews would you say lived in this town?
There were in this village was 8,000 people lived there. Out of that, I think 20%, 70% was Protestant, but 20%, 25% was Catholic, and Jewish. They were like 270 Jewish people lived there before the war.
The people that lived, the Jewish people, did they basically, they stayed, were you able to move, could you live in different places, or did you have to stay in certain parts of the town?
No, you could go any place you wanted. In the 1948, they made it easier, but we were almost Hungarians, almost. Jewish people, but they really never let you be a Hungarian. You were always an outsider. You were Jewish and you were not a Hungarian.
Were Jewish people, and this is 1938 basically when you were...
Yes, I was born.
Were they allowed to be government workers? Could they go to university?
Could have gone to the university, but could never be in a government. And most of them were like my father were painters. They were maybe a jeweler, maybe a butcher in the village, or a baker. It was a nice life over there.
Were you able to, the non-Jews, did your father have customers that were non-Jews? It wasn't just Jewish people?
No. Most of them were non-Jews.
Okay.
You know, outside of the village, there were some big, richer Hungarians would hire them to go and paint their houses.
How many generations of your family lived in this village? You said your grandparents.
Yeah.
Is that grandparents on your mother's side and your father's side, both?
Well, my mother's side, I think they came from Romania, the Friedmans. My father's side, I think as far as we could go back, was always, they lived in Hungary. They lived in, mostly in Kunhegyes.
So you're 1938 is when you're born.
Yes.
Right? So as a child, what's the earliest thing you remember? Your life.
5 years, 6 years old.
So let's say 5 years, 6 years. So this is about 1943, something like that. Before, do you remember what it was like when World War II began? I know that the Germans didn't occupy Hungary at that point.
They didn't occupy Hungary because they were allies.
They were allies, right?
The Hungarians were allied with the German.
So do you remember what it was like being Jewish? Was it different? Do you remember anything? Your parents had to do certain things, or they weren't allowed to do certain things when the war began? Well,
the war was going on. Like you said, in Hungary, they came in only 1944.
Right. But
so things were, and we heard stories that what's happening, the Polish Jews, they were killing them, or something like that, but was nothing real that we would know that it could happen to us. And but what they did is that they called in the men to the army.
Was your father?
My father was in the Hungarian army, and then they took away they had guns like a soldier. They took it away, they gave them a shovel. They became a labor force. They were just working in front of the Germans, preparing the roads.
Is this everyone in the Hungarian army, or is it just the Jews?
No, everybody was.
So the Hungarian army was made to be laborers.
Yes.
For the Germans.
For the Germans. And what happened is only the women, old men, and children stayed in the village because nobody else was there. And when the Germans came in, actually they didn't have to do too much. The Hungarians took care of everything. They make us wear the yellow star, and Then they got us together. They locked up the houses, got in the middle of the street. They walked us out to the gypsy quarters. The gypsies lived in outside of the village. By the time they took the gypsies, I believe they killed them all. They put us in there. That was a ghetto. Mm-hmm. And then from there, they took us to a city, Szolnok. There was a sugar factory there. And they put us in there.
Well, before this happened,
yes.
Before they moved, before 1944, your father, when did your father leave to go into the military?
Well, I was 2 years old. I never remember my father.
1940, 1941, basically.
Yeah,
right?
see, I don't never remember my father.
You don't remember?
I don't remember him.
So when how old, were you the oldest child, or how many?
No, I had a sister, Eva.
And she
is 1 year older than I am.
So just the two of you? Your parents have the two children?
Well, there is a little side story to this.
What's the side story?
The side story is that my mother, like I said, they were both in a village. They grew up together. They went to school together. And my father happened to get very friendly with one of the peasant girls. Her name was Elizabeth Csőregi, and she got pregnant. She had to leave the village because those days you can't have a child without a father. So she left and went to another village. And then my mother and father got married. That was in 1935.
So this relationship with this girl, peasant girl, was before your parents got married. Is that what you said?
Yes.
Okay.
So then she came back to her parents, and this boy was growing up with the grandparents of hers, you know. But anyhow, this is a little side story. But
that was your father's
my father's son.
Mm-hmm.
But then they got married, and it was never like that a Jewish person would marry a Christian
mm-hmm.
girl. So my parents got married, my mother and father got married, and had my sister Eva. She's was born 1937, mm-hmm. and then she had me. Mm-hmm. And that time things were not so good, so my mother really didn't want me to born.
She didn't want you to be born.
Yeah, but at the end I was born.
Mm-hmm.
So.
So after the war has begun, your father is away. And what did you do for money, your family? Because your father was not there to paint.
We moved in with my grandfather, my Polatsek grandfather, and we were living with them, and eating and whatever.
With your grandparents, with your grandparents.
Yes.
And is that where you stayed until the Germans came?
Yes.
Okay, so were you in school then?
No, not yet. I was only like 5 years old.
So did you have Hebrew school?
No.
Did they have a synagogue? Did you go to a
synagogue? They had one synagogue in a village, but by that time, like most Jewish families, the father would take the son to the synagogue and they would pray and they come home and keep Sabbath and all that. But by the time my father was in home, there was no Jewish life going on.
Mm-hmm. No one to teach you.
And was nothing going on there as far as religion.
How about your grandfather? Did he try to do something?
No, they were not so religious. Mm-hmm. See, my mother's mother would speak Yiddish. She knew how to speak Yiddish. But none of the Hungarians would speak Yiddish. Mm-hmm. They wanted to be Hungarians, and they really wanted to be a Hungarian, but like I said, at the end, they never let you.
Is the thinking, why was it they wouldn't speak Yiddish? What was their thought process?
Nobody to teach them. Nobody to teach my mother.
Did they look down upon people who spoke Yiddish?
No. It was see, Yiddish came from Germany. Mm-hmm. See, the people who lived in Germany, they picked up this Yiddish, mm-hmm. which is a mixture of German and Yiddish. But our family never got into, except my grandmother, who came from Romania. She spoke Yiddish. And my grandfather, the husband, spoke Romanian, because they came from Romania to Kunhelyes. But the Polatsek family was always there. I mean, as far as we could remember, is always lived in.
Do you remember having friends that you played with when you were 5 years old?
Yes.
Were they
yes.
Jewish children?
Some were not. As kids, we didn't know.
What type of activities did you do?
We take a rag, made a ball out of a rag, rags,
rag,
and you
yeah.
kicked the ball around. We, played soccer.
Soccer was
was a game. But like I said, I was only 5 years old, so it wasn't much.
As far as getting water, did you have a chore? Did you have to go get water from the well?
Well, I could, again, I was 5 years old, but when we came back, that was our everyday job, is to go get water.
You mean after World War II?
Yes.
But I'm talking about before then.
Well, I was only 5. The thing was heavy.
So 1944, I don't know, what is the date, do you know, when Germans occupied Hungary?
I think it was in June or something like that. And
What do you remember what happened?
Like I said, we were at my grandfather's house. They locked up the house like we're gonna come back. And I remember that. And then they took us out in the middle of the street wearing the yellow star, and they took us and marched us out. We just had to walk out. And some village people were on the side, some would be cursing us, what time that you guys leaving, and and some were, my mother had non-Jewish friends, and they were sad that this is what's happening. And like I said, they took us to the outside of the village.
This was the place where the gypsies used to live?
Used to live. And we were there, that was a ghetto. We were there maybe for a week or so. Not good conditions, had no drinking water, as was not right.
It's outside? This was
the houses. They lived. The gypsies lived in these houses. See, the Hungarian gypsies who lived in a village, they would play music. They would play violins, and they would play in the bars.
So there were still Jews, some gypsies still there?
No.
No. Okay.
They were gone.
This is what they did for a profession before they were to leave.
Yeah. So they from there they took us to this bigger city.
What was that city?
Solno.
And you walked there?
No, I think they took us with a train.
Okay.
And that wasn't too far. And this was outside, the big factory, sugar factory. And outside was loaded with people. We were outside. We carried whatever we could, because we didn't know what's going to happen.
So did they put you in this factory or just outside the
factory? Outside.
So how many people would you say were there?
Well, for all over from the countryside. All over the countryside, I have no idea.
Thousands of people?
Probably 1,000 of people.
So when you got there, what were you supposed to do then?
Well, we got there, went to the gate. There were dead people on either side of the gate. They shot these people, probably for a reason to say that nobody should escape. We already were in there. And when we got there, they started interrogating the women. They took them into these rooms and they beat them. They beat them to tell where is the money. Hungarians did this, not the Germans. Hungarians, they beat the women. Where did you hide the money? They was always after the money. It's like robbing somebody. So we were in this place maybe for, 3-4 days.
Was your mother interrogated?
No. My mother was next in interrogation. And my mother was so scared that these people were going to beat her. that they had a transport, and they called our name to get on the transport. And her sister says, no, don't go, we wait till the next one. And my mother says, no, no, we have to get on here because this guy wanted to interrogate her, and there was no more room to be there. He said, I'll get you tomorrow. So my mother was afraid that this guy gonna interrogate. And we had no money. I mean, we were poor. We had no real money.
But
But
this transport?
Hmm?
So you went on the transport?
we get on these cattle cars. They put us up there.
Okay.
They was only room to standing. They had one pail for people to use for if they have to go to the bathroom. And we were standing, you know, kids, old people, you know, they locked the door and they took us. I don't know how many days we were there, but like I said, some people died in the thing there, and we had no place to go. I mean, it was locked up. So they
There
opened.
was no water for you.
No water.
Any place to
Nothing.
air? Were there windows?
No, it was a cattle car. It was, you know, was nothing there. My mother was so smart. She made a paste out of chicken fat and flour. It's a paste they use for cooking, and I think that's what we ate. I mean, we had something to. That's all we ate.
Your mother, you, and Ava. Is that right?
Her sister, actually, almost the whole Polatsek family. My grandfather, my grandmother, my grandmother, Friedman,
Your mother's
because my mother's father died, passed away before this happened. He died before. So we were all together. My cousins were there. You know, it was they called the names, you know, like Polatseks. So we all get on the train, and then the train stopped. We got off.
Talking 15, 20 people? Is that what you think? About 15 or 20 people?
Or our family. But there was more, you know, more in the train.
I mean, the train
Yeah.
is filled, but I mean,
Yeah.
your family.
Yeah, but the train stopped. They took us off the thing, you know.
Where were you when it
Hurry up.
stopped?
We were in Austria.
Okay.
They took us into this place where they disinfected people. Because we were going to this place where there was a factory, they making canned foods for the German army. So that's where my mother gonna be working. So they disinfected us. And my mother won't let, say they had the men go separately and the women. My mother kept me because she was afraid she gonna lose me. So she took me and she always turned me around so nobody could see that I was a boy, you know. So and then in there I saw women, black and blue, the ones who got beaten. I mean, so many of them
Were they made to undress?
but we were all naked.
All naked?
Yeah. And then they got us into this room, a shower room, and when the water came on, they were screaming. Everybody was screaming. They thought maybe gas coming, not the water. But the water came, we cleaned ourselves, and then they took us into this place in Vienna. That's in Austria.
You went into this. You went to this place where you
Disinfected.
got disinfected.
Yeah.
And you go back on the train.
No, then we were close to the factory where my mother's supposed to be working.
Right.
So there were barracks there.
Okay.
It's like it was a concentration camp, but not a death camp,
The work camp.
a labor camp. So my mother went into the factory working. They were packing, like I said, canned goods for the German army. And we were just playing around on a garbage dump. We found something to eat, you know, whatever.
They didn't feed you.
No, they gave food, but they give you very small amount of bread. And then the workers got a little food, more food. Kids didn't get much.
What the living conditions in the barracks? Can you describe what it was like?
Well, we were all, you know,
Did you have your own bed?
we had bunk beds, at the bottom and the top, and you had.
Did you have your own, or did you have to sleep with your
Well,
sister?
my sister and I would be
Did
together.
your mother have her own? Did she have to sleep with
My mother, no, my mother was also alone. Yeah, and then my grandparents were there, like I said, and my grandfather, being a painter, he got always a job, something to paint in a factory. You know, they used him to you know, do labor, do something. Sometimes we went out to the fields with my mother and all the kids, and we picked peas or potatoes. So we did a little bit of work.
But your mother was there basically for what they call slave labor.
Slave labor, correct.
And that's what everyone else was doing in this factory.
Yes, no, we didn't get paid. I mean, they didn't get paid.
How many hours a day did your mother have to work?
I don't know, but maybe 10 hours working in a factory.
What about the sanitary conditions? What was that like as far as there's no bathroom?
Well,
So-
they, you know, we were in the barracks close to the factory. You know, we had to go to the bathroom. We could go into the factory, use the factory. It was a good sized factory. Had toilets.
They had toilets.
You know, so that was not much of a problem.
And how long were you there?
Till the Russian army came.
So we were talking about a year.
A year, 1 year.
During that year, did any of your family members die? You know, pass away
No.
because of the.
No. One time the SS came, they lined up all the kids. They said, tell the kids, they don't do nothing here, they're gonna take us away. And the man who owned the factory talked to the SS and says, no, you must keep the children here. So that was, he saved us won't take us
The
away.
owner of the factory.
Yeah.
You wouldn't know his. Would you
He
know
was
his
an
name?
Austrian person who owned the factory, and I guess he needed, all the men were in the army in Germany and Austria, so he needed labor to keep this factory going. So that's how he got these people.
So what was the purpose of the factory? What did they do there?
Made canned goods for the German army, like peaches, peas, whatever we picked.
Rations. They were
You
making
know,
rations.
they were making, yeah. But what happened is that before we get on the train, the rest of the train went to Auschwitz.
So your family got
Yeah.
out of this.
If we didn't get on this transport, we would have been in Auschwitz.
So going back, when you were you went to the place where the gypsies were. You were living there, and then they walked you to a place to interrogate you.
No, that was in a sugar factory.
At the sugar factory, right? And then they were going to interrogate
My mother.
and so you went on this train.
They called our names, so my mother's sister said, I'm tired, because we were living outside, you know, in the rain, whatever it was outside. And we got on this transport.
Was it did you have the option to get on this train?
Well, we could have not show up. You know, they called your name,
All right,
that
you don't show up, you stay
then they
there.
take somebody else.
You would have stayed there, and then you would have been shipped to Auschwitz.
Auschwitz.
So the fact you decided to go on this train, the name was called.
Right.
So the luck was that their name was called to start with.
Yes. Yes.
But like you say, you could have said, "I'm not afraid to go there. I'll just
Right.
stay
They would have
here."
filled the
I mean, if
cattle
you'd
car with
stayed-
somebody else.
If you'd stayed, you would be and been sent to Auschwitz. Your family.
Correct.
So the whole family went there.
Yeah.
So the war ends, and what do you remember about the Russians came to the factory, or how did you know the
Yes.
war ended?
Well, what happened is, you see, the Germans, when they were, the Russians were pushing the Germans out, you know, they would have a unit come and blow up everything. They blew up factories, they blew up the bridges, they tried to make everything hard for the Russian army to advance. So they were coming so fast that they didn't have time to blow up the factory and probably kill us, because the last SS came, they were the killers. They would just get rid of everybody because they didn't want no witnesses. So it happened that they couldn't do that. So the Russian army came, opened the gate, and he says, "Get out." So, you know, they opened the gate, so we started walking back to...
Before that happened, did you hear anything or see anything that from the you know, explosions or anything that the soldiers fighting?
Well, sure. See, what happened is that the Russians were firing. We were in a bunker. They had a bunker, and we went down to the bunker because it was a war going on. Matter of fact, a few times an American airplane would come and drop a bomb very close to where the barracks were there. I remember going out, there's a big crater, and we went out to pick up shrapnel. It was still hot from the explosion. And then, like I said, the Russians were shooting, the Germans shooting back, so we went through, but we were in this big bunker. So then the Russians came and opened the gate, and he says, "Get out."
The Russians said, "Get out of the bunker."
No, go.
Go, leave. So now...
Now we started walking back to Budapest.
And this is a couple of... How far would you say to Budapest?
Yes.
Okay, so how far
It's
was
like
it?
200 kilometers. Like it took us, I figured out it took us 2 weeks to get back
You're
from
walking.
Vienna. Walking from Vienna, we went to Vienna, to Prague, which is Czechoslovakia, and from there to Budapest.
All walking.
All walking, climbing over bridges which were blown up. And
And you're talking thousands of people doing this?
well, no, we were just one group together.
I mean,
The family stayed
But
together.
on the roads, there were...
Or everybody. You know, the Russians were coming this way. We had to walk in the gutters. A few times the Germans came with a aeroplane and machine gun the road, you know, and the Russians, we were in the ditches. Russians were on the other side. And so, you know, the Russian army was going towards Berlin. And we were going back against them.
The war is still going on, and
Oh, yeah.
you and untold numbers of people
We're walking
are
back.
trying to get away from what's going on.
Yes.
Get back to cities that are not in the war anymore.
Yes.
And the roads are filled with all kinds of refugees.
And Russian tanks and trucks and whatever was going towards Berlin. Because this is, you know, Vienna, then the next big one is Berlin. So the Russians were...
So first, after you left the factory, you went to where first? What city did you go to first? You said to Vienna, you said?
Before Vienna, yeah.
And then from Vienna, you went to...
No, we stayed there.
Oh, you stayed in Vienna.
Yeah.
Okay. You mentioned Prague and Budapest.
When we were walking back,
I'm talking about when you're walking back.
we went to Slovakia, Prague, and then from there to Budapest.
Okay, but Vienna, you didn't stay in Vienna, or you
No,
did?
no.
Okay, so but ultimately you wound up in Budapest.
Going back. Once in a while, we would catch a train.
Oh, they had trains
We
running.
would the train would come and say they're going east. We wanted to go east. So we get on the train. We went maybe for, I don't know, few miles. Then they took the train away. They had to get off and start walking again. So mostly we walked. Took us 2 weeks to get back, which
What
is like
What did you do for food?
whatever we had. What, potatoes.
Were you able to get any of the food that was in the factory? Take any of that?
We had, we took canned goods, you know, whatever we could carry to the one was left over.
Do you know what happened to the owner of the factory?
Well, he escaped. I mean, all of them, they were
escaped.
they were afraid of the Russians.
He left to go toward
West.
Berlin.
West, yeah, because they were all afraid of the Russians, and that's
So you
how.
had some canned food.
Yeah, and whatever we could find here and there, had empty houses We would go in an empty house, and if they had some food there, we would eat
So
something
you're
like that.
6 years old when this
Yes.
is going on?
Yes.
And of course, at this point, it's just your mother and you and your family.
Yeah. And my sister had chicken pox. She was sick, but she couldn't. You know, we were not in bed. We couldn't rest. But she was all right.
Now, what happened to your father during the?
My father was, like I said, a Hungarian unit was how you call it, watching them, and they would go and, like I said, build the roads for the Germans.
Right.
So we were ahead of the Germans, and the Russian overrun the Germans, overrun my father's unit,
Right.
the labor thing. They took him prisoner with the Germans. They put him in a prison camp in Russia.
You know where in Russia?
In Tula, I think he was.
What year
Tu-
was that?
Tula.
that he got
It
captured?
must have been 1944. Because that's when the Russians were
So
coming.
how long was he in the prison?
See, what happened is the war was over in 1945. My father didn't come home till 1948. So
They kept him in the prison that time?
kept them in the prison at that time, yeah. But the Germans, they should have left him, you know, or put him in a Russian army. I mean, but he was a prisoner, war prisoner. And like I said, when we get back to Budapest, we walking in this big park, and everybody is celebrating, or flags are flying. Says, what is this? Said, they looked at us like we were crazy, that it's May 1st. May 1st is a big holiday for the communists. So it was May 1st when we arrived there, and we had lice, we had not clean, I mean we were dirty. So we went into this Budapest, into the synagogue, we cleaned up, we got all cleaned up, and they gave us food, and then we get on the train, we went back to Kunhegyes.
Going back to your town. So how long did you stay in Budapest?
Maybe a week.
Were there people? Did you meet refugees, people that had escaped the concentration camps in Budapest?
Oh, they were all coming back. Oh, sure. They were all coming back from some who survived Auschwitz, some who survived other camps. They were all coming back to
Did you meet people from your town at that point, or did you have to wait
not
until-
really. When we got back to the village, that's when
So when you got back to the village, was your home still there?
the
Or your-
home was there. It was all emptied out.
empty
You know,
out?
they took the sewing machine, or you know, whatever beds, they took everything out. So when we went back, my grandparents trying to put back their houses. My mother's sisters would like to bring, you know, they went to the neighbors. They said, "Oh, this is mine. Would you give it back to me?" And this, and you know, trying to put everything together. And then
So they went to the neighbors to ask them to give back the
because
things
they
the
robbed,
neighbors had
they,
taken,
you know, they took everything.
because they figured they would not see you again.
Exactly.
And did neighbors do that? Did they give back the
Some
things?
were said, "We wish you didn't come back." You know, because you know, they could have kept whatever it was there. And so then we started going to school. I was 6 years old,
So this is 1945 or 46?
45. We
So they
started
had
going
public school there.
so this was mostly a Protestant town.
Okay.
So the school was run by the Protestant church. And we went to this school, which, you know, and by that time, this my father's son, he was in the same school too. But we really didn't know too much.
How old are how much is he?
He's 3 years older than I am.
Okay.
You know, when I was 6, he must have been
What
9.
happened to him during the war?
He stayed with the grandparents.
So they weren't because they weren't Jewish.
He was not. He was as a Protestant.
Right.
He went to church and everything.
He stayed in his home with his grandparents. They weren't sent away to any labor camp.
No, not.
Just stepping back for a minute, just briefly describe for me and others all the Jewish people. There were 350,000, I understand, Jews that lived in Hungary about 1944.
Yes.
And almost all of them were sent to concentration camps and murdered?
568,000 people got killed. Jewish people got killed in Auschwitz. There's so many camps. There were a lot of camps in Poland and Germany, Dachau, and all these other camps. So they were all, the one who survived, they were coming back.
The 500,000, there were 6 million that were murdered, but I mean, the 500,000 you're referring to are who?
I read this someplace that's how many Hungarian Jews got killed.
I understand. I thought it was 350,000, but that doesn't matter. Almost everyone that was, except for your family and a few other people.
Depends who gave you the numbers, but see, by the time the Germans got to Hungary in 1944, they knew exactly what to do. The trains were rolling into Auschwitz, and it was just a production. I mean, it's just killing people. So by the time they got there, they knew exactly what's going on, and even though it was late when they get to Hungarians, it was there.
So after the war in Hungary was now ruled by the Russians.
Russian communists.
So the country was a communist country. So how was that different than before World War? Before, you'd say during the war, but it was Hungary was independent. Now they're being ruled by Russia. So how did you find things different?
Well, you see, people in America don't understand what socialism is. It means the government owns everything. The government owns the bank, government owns the housing, the government owns the factories, everything owned by the government. So now you have to please the government. If you have a job, you want to get a job, they control you. It's a total control. And we were living under communism, socialism, and things were going on. So slowly, people were coming back from the Russian camps, where they kept my father. Like I said, 1945, 3 years later, my father came home. By that time, we were going to school in Kunhelyes. And then the next thing is my mother put me and my sister to another town, to a religious school.
Protestant or Jewish?
No, Jewish.
Okay.
This was Jewish, because she couldn't keep us up because she had nothing to. She had no money. From there, we went to an orphanage in another big city, Szeged, and this was a Zionist camp. This was a Jewish Zionist kind of training us to go to Israel. We was groomed to go to Israel as children. These were most of the people. We had a mother, but most of the kids had no parents. They died. That's why it was an orphanage. So my mother put my sister and I in there, and we were there probably 3 years. And then my father came home. See, my mother was smart. My mother didn't want to stay in Kunhelyes because she knows if my father comes home to Kunhelyes, he will never leave. So by that time, while we were in an orphanage, my mother went to Budapest and went to get an apartment. Again, the government have to assign you an apartment. So my mother got signed up and she got an apartment in Budapest. And that's when my mother went down to Kunhegyes, and
Did she have a job? Your mother, did she
No.
have a job?
no. I mean, she tried to do things, you know, like my grandfather was a tinsmith. He had some tools. He hired a guy who could maybe do labor like a tinsmith. But actually didn't have much. That's why she put us into this orphanage.
So what did she do for an income? Did she have no job and the government gave her food, or how did she live?
Well, before she got this apartment in Budapest, she was in Kunhegyes. You know, she would be with the grandparents.
But I mean, once she get to Budapest, she needs.
To how she, well, whatever she get. I think there's a Jewish organization, they call it the Joint. They would give her food to live on.
In Budapest.
In Budapest, see before. But see, before she went down to Kunhegyes and asked the grandfather of this boy
Okay.
to if she would take him.
So she offered to take
My
your
mother asked-
father's illegitimate son. And why would she do that? Do you want to stop for a moment?
You tell him.
I can't do that. She was very special.
Well, she promised. Maybe we should stop it. My mother promised if we all come back, she'll go and get this boy.
And she did.
And she did. So he was 13 years old. She took him up to Budapest, to the apartment. My father came back from Russia. And then she came down to this orphanage and took me and my sister to Budapest, into this apartment to live. And there was Charlie.
Charlie.
And we never questioned it.
Who Charlie was or how?
I know we knew who he
Why?
was.
Why
We
he
know
was
how
there.
it was, we know everything, but we would never say, well, what is this kid doing here, you know?
Yeah.
It was such a natural thing, and from there on, we just went to school in Budapest, and my father started working as a house painter, much more jobs in Budapest, a lot of apartments. He would paint apartments. And only thing the communists did something good is that they made sure everybody learns a trade. And my brother was into this school to be a tool and die maker. They gave him uniform. It was organized. Everything was going good, and he did become a tool and die maker. He learned the trade, and my mother made my sister to learn how to sew. She became a seamstress, and I was growing up, and
You became a tennis player.
so you could beat me.
Yeah, you were saying? And you became?
Well, I was only 18 years old, so I was going to a technical school. And then a year before the revolution, I went to work for my father as a painter. And we had a push cart. You had to put the letters and the buckets, and we would push the cart to the job, and different jobs we go and paint. And
Did you like
then
that? Did you like that, doing painting?
Not too much, not too much. It was, but I felt like working. I was a worker. So then came the revolution, 1956.
Okay.
So again, the Russians shooting, bombing, whatever. They said they're going to leave Hungary to become independent.
Tanks came into Budapest? The tanks came into Budapest?
They were in there. Then they started fighting and they left. They said, okay, we're leaving. Then happened, same time happened the Suez Canal. So America felt much better to look after the Suez Canal than Hungary. So the Russians see that nothing's happening. They came back, bombed the city. Everything was all messed up. So Charlie and I, we got on the train and started going west to the border. See, it was an iron curtain. You could never get out of this country. You could never go close to the border. They would arrest you, and you could not get out. That's what the Iron Curtain was. But this time it was all chaos. Nobody could control it. So we got on the train, and the train stopped before get to the station, and they said, whoever wants to escape, get off here, because the Russians are at the station taking people off. Because you had no reason to be at the border station. So we got off the train. We went to the farmer's house, and we asked him that we could stay till dark. He said, yeah. So there was another couple there already.
You're with who? You're with
My
Charlie?
brother, Charlie and I.
Okay.
And then when it got dark, we started walking the fields towards Austria. We could see a little glow on a horizon. That we knew that was the village in Austria. So we walked a few times. They shut up. These flares became lighter than daylight, and they started shooting. They knew people were out there, so the Russians were shooting to.
Without even, they couldn't see anybody. They just.
Well, no.
shooting.
This light went
The
on.
Flares. Okay.
The flare went on. It was like we threw ourselves down there. But I think they were afraid to go out there because a lot of people had guns, whoever escaping. So they just raked the field, just to do it. But anyhow, we ended up in this village in Austria. And
To get over the border, it was just walking and you're over the border? Were there fences?
fence. We were walking, and all of a sudden there was a rise, and then there's a fence. So we're looking for a break in the fence. There was somebody even there before. So we fell onto the other side of the fence, and they had like maybe 10 feet. They rake up 10 feet. So the next morning they could see the footsteps, how many people crossed the border or whatever. So we ran across the border and ended up in Austria.
So this was
56.
1956. So the Russians came back. Did they reoccupy Hungary?
Oh, sure.
Until when?
For a long time. I thought when we escaped, I thought I will never see my parents again, because I couldn't go back.
So how did you see them again?
Well, the communists fell apart.
And when was that?
1980,
No,
89.
So we're talking 30 years more? You didn't see your parents for the 30 years?
Yes. No.
You brought Omar at 65.
What?
You took your mother out of Hungary in 1965.
Well, anyhow, the communists fell apart. But by the time we ended up going to Austria, we went to camp, signed up again always. We could have gone any place. We could have gone to Australia.
These were DP camps?
Yes.
Is that what this is?
Yeah.
Displaced persons camps?
Yes,
They
correct.
They weren't for just Jewish people.
No. I think the group I was going, I was only a Jewish person. My brother was Protestant. Most of
So there
them.
were people escaping from Hungary.
Yes.
And who ran these camps?
As soon as we crossed the border, the religion came up. They say, what are you, Catholic, Protestant? because they are the ones who would set up to, how you call it. So when we were in line, they say, well, I said, I'm Jewish. My brother Charlie behind me said, what are you? I said, I'm Protestant. He said, oh, what the hell happened here? How come you know? But anyhow, we explained, that what happened. He grew up as Protestant. So we went from camp to camp. Mm-hmm. We signed up with Catholics, we signed up with the Protestant. I never signed up with the Jewish because they said that if you sign up, they take you into Vienna, put you in a hotel, and you could be there for months because we would come to America. Mm-hmm. So we ended up, at the end, in Germany in an army camp. Mm-hmm. And they flew us over to New Jersey.
Oh.
They opened up a Camp Kilmer in New Jersey, was a closed-up camp, army camp. They opened it up for the refugees.
Refugees escaping from
whoever escaped.
Communist Hungary.
Mm-hmm.
And that was what year was that?
1957.
So tell me how you while your parents were living in Budapest?
Yes.
Father was house painting?
Yes.
How about your sister? What happened to her?
My sister was living with them. We stayed there. And at the end, she got married, had two boys, and my father had a good life. They always pushed him to join the Communist Party, mm-hmm. but my father never did. Mm-hmm. But if you join the party, it means you get ahead. You could get ahead. It's a system. Like I said, you rely on government. Mm-hmm. If you were in good with the government, you get ahead. But meanwhile, while we were in Budapest as a young kid, we used to line up for bread. There was bread shortage. Line up for milk. Line up for sugar. This was a communist system. It was because what happened is they took the farm away from the peasants, and they made like a kibbutz, like a collective farm. Mm-hmm. And when you work, nobody worked that hard. You work for yourself, you produce. Mm-hmm. These farms were not producing enough food. Mm-hmm. So we had to, line up all the time.
So you're in 1957, you're now in the United States.
I'm here.
And you are in a camp. And
only way you could get out of the camp if somebody come and sponsor you.
Is that what happened to you?
You never showed up.
Anybody show up?
Anyhow, well, we had relatives here. My mother's side had relatives here. And one relative came out and she said that, your uncle died. The uncle was a relative, was a freedman. Mm-hmm. And she said, I'm a widow, I have one son, I don't have much money. So we told her, it's okay, don't worry, we'll take care of it. We'll handle ourselves. So what happened is that we only knew about America is New York. We wanted to go to New York. And they said that there's no more work in New York. There's no more, how you call it, Protestant priest from Bridgeport. Mm-hmm. Bridgeport is the biggest industrial city in Connecticut. Mm-hmm. Remington Arms, Sikorsky, all these factories were there. So he came out and he took out 10 young men who had nobody. He sponsored them through the church. Okay. But not me. He says to me, he said to Charlie and I, he says, listen, I take Charlie out, but I'm gonna go back. I have friends in Hayes, Hebrew International, whatever it is. Mm-hmm. He said that he'll talk to them and they will bring me out. Mm-hmm. So Charlie went out, and a week later, he arranged that I had a soldier took me into Grand Central Station. Mm-hmm. Don't speak English. I didn't know a word of English. Mm-hmm. And he got me a ticket, bought me a ticket, And he told me, Bridgeport, you know, said, give me a ticket. So I get on the train, and the train is going, and I'm looking, I want to Bridgeport. I was lucky enough to find, you know, get off at Bridgeport. And I got off Bridgeport, and there were two people from this highest was waiting for
you.
yeah. One was spoke Hungarian, so I could. So they put me up with a Jewish family,
Yeah, right.
a room,
Okay.
had a room. So I'm there, and Charlie came see me that night. He was living with a Hungarian family in a rooming house. So and Charlie started working as a tool and die maker, and he was very good at it. And somebody said that there's a Hungarian man who owns a carpet store. If I want to, I said anything, I would have been anything. So he hired me. He spoke Hungarian, and there was a worker, a carpet layer. He says, Bill, his name was Bill. He said, Bill, take this kid out. Because see, laying carpet, you need to empty out a room. You have to bring in a carpet. You need two people. You can't do one. So he was arguing about that this kid don't speak English, or what I'm going to do with him. I know they were arguing about me, but I had no idea what they were saying. Anyhow, so I went out with him, and he says, bring me a hammer. I mean, what the hell I know about hammer? Whatever he wanted. I took 3-4 things over here, whatever he want. So anyhow, at the end, I get friendly with this guy. I started learning English. I get so friendly with him that I became a carpet layer too. I could work my own. And then at the end, we got together and we opened up a carpet store.
Oh.
Me and this Americano. And also, like I said, I always felt I'm an outsider in Hungary. I would never be a Hungarian. They would not let you be a Hungarian. You were Jewish. You were, you know. I came to America again. Soon as we start speaking, they say your accent. You know, I wasn't American. It's not easy to assimilate to a society. Maybe now it's easier because there's loaded with Spanish people speaking Spanish, you know, speak English, you know. But at that time in 1957, 58, 59, it was not easy to get together. And then came 1962, the Cuban crisis, about the missiles in Cuba. And Kennedy needed manpower because they were against the Russians. So I went into the army. They called me into the army. I got drafted. So they gave me training in New Jersey and gave me schooling, and then sent me over to Germany.
Sent you to Germany?
Germany. So now I'm in Germany. Now I'm in uniform. I'm the
in charge.
I'm in charge, you know.
The Germans.
Against against the Germans. I mean, actually, it was a very good, how you call it, good feeling. It was like I said, that I was more in charge. So I ended up in this army unit driving a tank. So we used to go on maneuvers, and we were rumbling through these villages, German villages, and shaking the houses. Then they sent us down to the border with Czechoslovakia.
That's communist.
That's where the Russians were, you know.
Right.
East Germany, West Germany, they were all still apart. So, you know, I tell you, it was a good experience being in the army.
How long were you in the army?
2 years. So, and every Sunday at the end of the month, I would call my mother from Germany on the phone, because I'd be able to call her. Couldn't go to see her, but I could call her. So,
Getting back to the After the war ended, you did go to Germany? Did you go to Germany at
Yes,
all?
yes. The German army, that's where it took us on a plane.
Oh, that's right, on the plane. And then from there...
They flew us to America.
Yeah, they went, okay.
Yeah.
So you went back home, it's 1964, is that what this is now, 1964?
Yeah, came back here.
What happened to your business?
Well, that time I didn't have a business. That time I still was
Oh,
working.
you're still working, you hadn't...
I was an independent worker.
Right.
And then what happened is that the communists would let my mother come out to visit.
Where you could leave Hungary to visit with your father?
No, just my mother.
They would just
Yes,
allow
ma'am.
one person to go?
Yeah. And what happened is that I was still in Germany, and my mother come to see my brother Charlie. And
Where Charlie was in the
Charlie was
military
in
too?
America,
He was in America, okay.
and I was in Germany, and I knew my mother is changing planes in Amsterdam to fly over here. I took a train, I went to Amsterdam. It's the first time I met my mother.
It's 1956.
Six.
So this is
1964.
about 8 years.
So anyhow, I met my mother, I spent a day with her, we stayed, and then she flew to America, and I was still in Germany, in the army. So my mother came to my brother, and then 64, I came back to America, and my mother was here, and they had a first supermarket in Bridgeport.
Your mother was...
In Bridgeport with my brother, Charlie.
They came to... She was able to leave permanently?
No, just to visit.
Okay, to visit, okay.
She went to this supermarket. That was a big time, first time. So they had the carts, you know, when it begins. Because you used to have little grocery stores. This was a big supermarket. And while she's shopping there, she heard Hungarian. And she went over there to this lady who was working there. And it was a Hungarian lady. And she got friendly with her. And this lady says, that is your son Steve, is he seeing anybody? And she said no. She says, here's a phone number. This young lady came out from Hungary. Same story, they let her come to her sister who lived in Westport. So she gave me this phone number to call this young lady. So I did call the number. I went out on a date, went to the movie.
What'd you see? What was the movie?
What was the movie?
I didn't understand the word.
I know the movie, but she spoke a little English, but she was keep asking me what they saying. And anyhow, so
Did you go, shh, I'm listening to the movie?
no, I was nice. So
Well,
this
that was the time you were nice.
I was nice.
She said there was one time you
One
were
time.
nice.
So my mother is waiting home for me, you know, says, son, how was the girl? I said, oh, this Elizabeth is crazy. This girl never had a date. She's got a big neck. She's got big knees. I said, this girl is awful, you know, just terrible.
Well, you were lying about this?
I was lying. Well, here she is. But anyhow, what happened is that the next day I come home, I'm taking a shower, and my mother said, where are you going? I said, well, I feel so bad for this girl, never had a date. I'm going to take her out one more time. My mother thought I was, what a nice guy I am. So I took her out with my friend, and then my mother called up his friend. He says, Joe, he says, is this girl, what does she look like? So Joe says, oh, she's nice. She's a nice girl. So the third night I took her home.
To your mom? Your mom like her?
I think so. Spoke Hungarian, you know, so that's what
So now
happened.
your mother gets to go back to Hungary.
To go back to Hungary, and then now the communists are falling apart. East Germany, they take the wall down, you know, they get together. The communists are.
At least Germany, that wasn't until 1980s.
89.
But this was in 1960.
No.
When you're meeting her in 19 when?
64.
64, 5?
I'm sorry,
Six.
66.
At least 66.
So we're talking, I mean, that's 20 some years you're talking about.
Yeah.
Going,
No,
So
but
the whole 20-some years, you don't see your mother.
Yes. But anyhow, the communists falling apart, and they let people come out, especially if you have an apartment, you give up the apartment, because at that time still the state owned everything. And you give up your apartment, they let you go. So my father and my mother came out permanently.
And they went to the United States?
Yeah, they came to us in Bridgeport. Charlie and I, we bought a house, and then we were together. My mother, my father.
So how old were your parents when they left? They rebel escaped. How old were they?
How old?
Yeah.
54.
No, you're born in 1938.
Yes.
You must have been about 50 years old when they came out?
No.
The parents were 54.
Well, what year did they come out?
65.
65.
Oh, what happened? I thought it was, okay. When did they left Austria, Hungary in 19 when?
Permanently 65,
65.
like me.
1965.
Yes.
I was
Okay,
28 years old.
Right, okay, all right.
28 years
Okay.
old. So anyhow, they came out here, we bought them out, we got a house, and we living nicely together. And then I got married.
And your sister stayed in Hungary?
My sister with 2 sons and a husband. And all of a sudden, the husband fell in love. It happened to older men like us, you know. He fell in love, and then he let my sister come out with 2 boys. They could able to come out to Bridgeport.
Your sister left
My sister,
her husband there,
the husband now.
and 2 boys.
Yeah.
He stayed.
He stayed. So I keep asking him, he said, how you doing? Is it over? He says, no. So anyhow, my sister stayed here with the 2 boys. 2 boys went to school, and they grew up here in America. He stayed here. So one of them worked for Sikorsky, and one of them used to work with us. We had a carpet store, and used to work with us in the carpet
When
store.
did you open up the carpet store?
Well, first, we opened up with this Bill Collins. We opened up a carpet store together. And then I was working, and he loved to play golf. So he used to come down to Florida and say, you know, I sell you the business, I want to come to Florida. So after 2 weeks, he says, no, not yet, I'm waiting. He did it to me like 3 times. Then finally I said, Bill, either you sell out, or I sell out, whatever you do, we're going to separate. And we did. So I opened up a carpet store on our own. She came to work. She was a secretary and a bookkeeper, and sold carpet, and it was a very good business. It was doing excellent.
In Bridgeport?
And this was in Trumbull, which is on top of Bridgeport.
What was the name of the business?
Carpet Place.
Carpet Place.
And we did very well. And
Do you have any customers in the Glen Eagles that used to buy carpet from you?
not yet. Not yet. There is some people live in Hunter's Run. Used to
Yes.
be our customers.
Oh, okay. All right. That was
So
half kidding.
yeah. So then what happened is that we came down to Florida and went back and forth. And one time we said, okay, we're gonna leave. So I left the business to my son. I had a son, and I have 2 daughters.
What's your son's name?
David,
And your daughter's
Polatsek,
name?
Amy, and Jeanette. So anyhow, Amy lives in Boston now. David lives in Trumbull. And my other daughter lives in Eilat, in Israel. And so I left the business, and then it wasn't doing too good, the business. So we went back and we dismantled the business. got rid of everything, and then I had one tenant who was a plumber, a commercial plumber. So we talked to him. His name was Mitch. I said, Mitch, why don't you buy this building from me? Because you're paying rent to me already. If you buy it, you could handle your own. And that's what happened.
And when did you move to Florida?
19.
15 permanent.
1915? Is that when you moved here? Had you been, this was the first place you bought in Florida? Or
No,
had you,
no, we were on Loch Marie on another street, and then.
I mean, in Glen Eagles?
Yeah, Glen Eagles.
Glen Eagles,
Glen
first
Eagles.
place, yes.
But besides that, this Charlie became a multi-millionaire.
Charlie. So tell me about him.
Well, he was working in a factory. He see, under communism, you have to produce. You can't slack off. So they gave him a job, and he was done in 2 hours. So got the interpreter, and the union guy went to him and says, this was your day's job. What do you mean 2 hours, you're done? He finished it. He had to learn to slow down. But he was so successful, he was such a good guy. He went into partners with another guy. He had a small shop. This was a big factory. Then he went to a small shop, and he became his partner. And another person, John Myland, was a partner. The three of them created a new business, which they call fine blanking. And they become very successful.
What is it called again?
Fine blanking. It's a stamping.
Okay.
You know, but it became. I mean, they got like 7 factories all over
Really?
now.
So where is he now?
He's in California.
Oh, he
He
retired
lives
in California?
he lives in California. Yeah.
So when did how old were your parents when they passed away?
My Judy, speak up.
When they passed away, she was 90.
90. And how about your father?
Few years.
86, 87.
Did he ever, when he came to the United States, did he work or did
He worked for me.
Oh, he worked with you
At
in
the
business?
beginning, he would work for me, you know, helping as a helper. And then sometimes he worked for the guy I separated from, because he also kept a carpet store.
Okay.
And so we got friendly, and then my father would go help him out. You know, so, but then he ended up working in a factory, you know, to my brother's factory. He worked in there. And then from there he retired, and
Did he ever tell you what it was like being in prison?
yes, not much, but he told me why he was under Hungarian supervision. The Hungarian army people were watching them. They would get up at 5 o'clock in the morning in the snow, naked. They get him out. They were
Outside.
yeah. I mean, they were not nice. I mean, people, the feet, the toes would freeze off. People die. You know, they will get him like roll call. You know, that was crazy.
So this was a prison camp in...
Then in Russia, then he got into, see, like I said, Russians overrun the Germans, so they captured him, and all the other people run away, you know, like the Hungarians ran away from the Russians. He was in a Russian camp, and they would put him to work. I think he was working maybe in a bakery or someplace. They did something, because they kept a lot of Germans over there working way after the war to rebuild Russia. So they used them for working.
So do you think, looking back at your life, that you are lucky to be here? Or do you think...
It's luck. It's all luck. You have to be lucky. Every time I look at the American flag, I still say that it's amazing that I'm here. That I live
When
here.
you think of yourself as a part of this world, do you think of yourself as a Hungarian, an American? What are your
What happened here is I'm here in Glen Eagles playing tennis with you. I'm the biggest Hungarian you ever seen. Because they ask you, you're a Hungarian. I was never a Hungarian. Like I said, they would never allow you to be a Hungarian. A German couple come to Hungary and have a son. He became a Hungarian, but never a Jew. Never a Jewish person would allow you to be a Hungarian. Here I am, I feel I'm American. I mean, I served in the army, was great. We got together, I mean, right there when we were in Germany with all the people, all Americans are, so we were against somebody. We were united, we were together, we were Americans. So that's how it stayed. That I really feel lucky to be alive and to play tennis with you.
Do you have grandchildren?
Yes. Now you're going to ask me the names, right?
No. How many grandchildren do you have?
But depends how you figure it out.
8?
How you want to, you figure the extra ones too?
Someday they're going to watch this video. So you're going to be talking to them. So now you're going to look in the camera, and I want you to tell them about your advice for getting the most out of life.
Well, what you have to have ambition, number one. You have to have ambition. You have to have luck. And common sense. Very important, common sense. And live a nice life. Have a good wife. Very important.
Husband? And the little girls?
What?
The little boys? You said have a good wife. You're telling them. What?
Oh, to them.
Yes, you're
well,
telling them.
shake up and be ambitious. Do the best you can, and live a good life.
Is there anything else you want to say to them? Because that's who's going to watch this. Because your descendants.
Well, what else can I say besides? Like I said, I was lucky all my life, and
even though you were made to go to a work camp, even though you were almost sent to a death camp, even though you worked for the communists.
It's all luck, and like I said, have to do the best. But common sense is the thing to do. To live your life with some kind of a meaning.
You're now. Where are you now?
In the concentration camp. I mean, concentration camp, playing on a garbage dump. My sister and I, and some of the cousins, and I found a carrot. And I put it in my pants, but my pants were so short, it stuck out. So the Gestapo, German Gestapo, came and he said, "You stole that carrot." He wanted to arrest me. I mean, I was only a little kid.
5 years old.
Yeah, 6 years old. And so, I mean, if he let me go, but my sister and I always laugh about that the carrot was sticking out from my pants. But, but there is a lot of little detours in life.
Okay.